Hello, everybody, and welcome to another show. Today, I have the extreme pleasure and honor of having Amanda Hayden on the show, and she is going to enlighten us about all things farming. Not maybe all things. I want to put a lot of pressure and sauntering, but I'm gonna put it out there that you are the expert on sauntering. So, because I know what it is technically, but I love the idea of it as an art. In fact, you wrote the book on sauntering called American Saunter, if I can speak correctly.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a thrill to be here today and talk with you. And I feel like we're just kind of like, I don't know if you watch the Drew Barrymore show, but she always crawls on the floor with her guests. And that's how I feel right now with you. I'm like, let's just sit on the floor and just talk.
we could do that. I mean, everybody would just see like our blank backgrounds, but
So yeah, thank you. And it's really exciting to talk about writing. I do a lot of presentations and talking, and my whole life it's been very academically oriented, which has been wonderful, and of course my passion. But now it's really it's very new. It's a very new thing for me. I've been writing my whole life. I mean, since I was 5 is when I got a journal for Christmas, and I started writing, and I still have that journal, and it's
that's amazing.
interesting to look and see the little 5 to 6. I mean, obviously it's a 5 to 6 year old, but there's still little threads of things I say. And I'm like, wow, like that was me. Like that was my little way of thinking. So I've been writing but it's only recently that I started putting it out there, like sending it for consideration. In the written, I've done a lot of open mics over the years, things like that. And so that's kind of part of the sauntering, it came from this whole saunter notion came from John Muir, one of my personal heroes, who he was asked one time, evidently, he was asked by somebody like, let's go hiking, or do you want to go hike? And he said something along the lines of, I detest the word hiking. Like, I don't want to, I don't like that word. And they were like, really? Like, they were so surprised by this. And as an avid hiker, I was surprised by this. When I read this, I thought, you don't like hiking? Like, what? You're like the nature person, the nature guru. But he went on to say he said we should saunter instead. And that he related it to when you're in a space of nature and you feel that reverence and you feel that sacredness and that stillness, you shouldn't just be like plowing through, like not paying attention. You should really saunter. You should take your time. And it comes from ancient medieval, the pilgrims who would be making pilgrimages to holy sites, a la Sinclair, which became the saunter, someone who saunters, essentially a saint who saunters. So it has this real holy connection, this real sacred, reverence. And that really stuck with me. I mean, I still like to take hikes, but I definitely enjoy hikes that are quiet and thoughtful, and I usually get a lot of ideas why I hike and stuff, and so I thought, what an interesting way to kind of apply that to life, and a very Buddhist perspective of, instead of just getting to the next thing or getting it as an academic, get through the semester, get to the next semester, get to the next week, get to the instead of looking at life like these things to be checked off, really sauntering. And so this began as a concept from Muir that then I started using in my environmental ethics class quite a bit, and kind of giving them little mini eco challenges to go out and saunter wherever, in nature, however, whatever that means to them, right? That could just be lingering after class to look at some art, or, just that whole, just taking a little time. And then I ended up writing a chapter for a textbook called Saunter Like Muir. And so it became this whole thing. And then when I started writing the poetry book, putting together the poems for the collection, and I was thinking about different titles. I knew it was about American landscape and backpacking and, all the contradictions, all the things that are all the divisions in America and the United States, but also the beauty and the potential of the United States. And I thought, what can I call it? And it's like American Saunter, because it really is that, for me, slowing down and paying attention, and you may not be able to actively change something in a moment, but by just paying attention and being mindful, you're able to observe and be part of it versus just being, kind of just existing or just kind of going through things.
I love that, especially like if you think hike is, we think like, oh, that's a hike. I mean, it's kind of negatively or a challenge based word. But sauntering is kind of like a much different perspective. And I honestly wouldn't like a hike maybe as not an avid hiker, but I do love to saunter through nature.
Yeah, I've come to appreciate it much more as someone that used to hike. I once had a friend that hiked in my early 20s. He said, going hiking with you is like a Baton death march. Remember that. And I was like, really? Because I just loved it. And now as I'm getting older and with my kids, it's like I really appreciate that slowing down and just all the facets of our life that can apply to in our relationships, as a parent, everything. Just
because what is the point, honestly? Like, is it to hurry to death, to the ultimate goal, which is death? Or is it to enjoy the path along the way? If you think about it like that. Getting to the top of the mountain is the end for us. Or do we want to enjoy the path up? So
absolutely.
Yeah, probably if we did think of sauntering, especially in our American culture, we're very like point A, point B, be efficient, don't waste time in between. Can you text, do a Zoom call, and order groceries while you're traveling to point B? And
very fast society, and rewarded, encouraged to multitask, right? Even if it's at the expense of the quality or the presence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I mean, I don't think it's doing us good. So maybe we all need to read American Saunter by Amanda Hayden.
That'd be lovely.
yeah. So everybody in America right now, go buy American Saunter from Amanda. The links will be in the description, as well as later on today after this show. I've had a little bit of a not sauntering morning. There's going to be an interview on my blog from Amanda. It's an incredible interview, so you can go read that and learn more about you. But for now, I'm going to saunter and not do that.
And just to clarify, the manuscript, it is under consideration. It's in process. It's not published yet. It's en route. It's in process. It's sauntering. It's sauntering towards its publication. So.
As writers, I feel like we're kind of, that describes writing, the writing world. It's just sauntering to the publication because it's never fast enough for us.
It's never a hike. I mean, I've heard a couple people say, "Oh, it happened like that," but that seems to be very rare in the publishing world, from what I'm gathering.
Yeah, I would say yes. Yeah, I actually self-published a lot and started my own publishing company, and I think a lot of it was because I don't like to saunter. Primarily.
It's really interesting, and that's a whole other talk, right? The different methods and avenues for publishing, which have changed in the last 10
dramatically
years.
Yeah,
so it's really interesting to kind of see these different options, and really that's part of what encouraged me to start trying, because I thought, okay, maybe it's not just the traditional big, maybe I can go to small presses, or maybe I can go here, or maybe I could do this. And so still exploring those options for that. Yeah, it's really it's encouraging.
Yeah. Well, you're a poet laureate, which I find absolutely fascinating. I feel like that would be like, oh, Amanda's a poet laureate. Well, of course. Like, does that help you, or how is that experience?
The experience has been extraordinary. And very, still, I'm actually in the last semester of my 2-year tenure, contract as being poet laureate. And I still am just like pinching myself, because it's just one of those things that it's something that I would have never imagined I would have been ready for, and it really, truly, it's something that a very dear friend of mine really encouraged and basically believed in me believed in me till I got there. And then when I got there, I said, oh yeah, I can do this. I can bring something to this. And still with, and it's really been, for me, it's been, I mean, I kind of have done things a little backwards, I think, than maybe a lot of traditional poets, because I don't have an MFA. I'm not an English professor. I'm a humanities professor. I teach cultures and religions and philosophies and environmentalism and all these different humanities courses. I don't teach English. I don't teach poetry. And so that's always been something I've done on the side, or just for fun or for passion. And so to start kind of merging these worlds and to be recognized in a more professional, wider arc for that has been scary, but thrilling and very validating, in the sense of, it's not that all of a sudden, oh, now I'm a poet. Because I always say, if you write and you love to write, you're a writer. And I've written, I had a moment, I told my students this, I said, I had a moment where several years ago, I found an old piece of butcher paper that I had, maybe about 20 years ago, had been at a coffee shop and had forgotten my journal to write. This was back when I lived in a little apartment that was noisy. So I'd go to the coffee shop and write. And I forgot my journal. And so I got a piece of, I asked for a piece of, like, I'm like, do you have any paper? And they gave me like a big sheet of that, like, wax paper or butcher paper.
Yeah.
And I wrote, like, filled that whole piece of paper. I mean, probably like 2 feet by like 4 feet, filled it front and back, and took it home. And I didn't think anything of it. I did not think anything weird about that. And then I pulled that out and I thought, that's a writer. I mean, that's a writer. That's somebody who was like, I'm going to write.
Yeah.
At the time, I would not have, I guess, recognized or validated myself in that way. I would have still said, well, I'm not a writer. I just like to write. So I've definitely, being the Poet Laureate has helped me own and verbalize and kind of embrace, like, yes, I'm a poet. Yes, I'm a writer, and I'm still learning and I'm still growing. And I hope I always feel that way, that I'm always learning new ways to express myself and learning new ways to write and new ways to play with language. And, it's never, if anything, this has just opened the doors for more of that growth and learning. And it's like, I'm always like, ooh, what else can I do? What other forms can I try? Or, I did my first villanelle, and I was like, oh, ooh, a villanelle. I just had never thought that would be something I would be able to do or be good. And I mean, it was amazing.
Oh, that's awesome.
Being in the position has, for me personally, been very confidence boosting, but also it's been an amazing, just light years way of connecting with people, bringing poetry to people, especially on campus, and that's probably the best compliment I've received is, and people have been so encouraging and supportive, but one of the best things I hear is after a big campus conference, and you're talking 800 people, and they're not all poets. They're people from all different backgrounds, and automotive and science, and every math, and one woman came up and she said, she goes, I don't like poetry. I didn't think I liked poetry. She goes, but I like that. I liked what you did. And it just really made my day, because I thought, like, that, maybe I'm opening some doors for people that think they don't like poetry or think that it's just something that's not for them.
Yeah.
Maybe they realize, oh, maybe it's not what I thought it was in my head. Maybe it's much more than that. And so
it's
that's
not all villanelles and shakes.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So it's been just extraordinary.
That is awesome. And I love how your path to being a poet is a saunter. I mean, that's kind of like, you're just going along, experiencing this, going down that path, let's see what's in this field. And all of a sudden you've arrived at that place.
You'd think I would have thought of that. I actually hadn't really thought of the poet path, but you're totally right on that. And I've often joked and said, I've spent all these years, climbing, getting my career, settled and becoming tenured and having my babies and, life and travel and all these things. And part of me, of course, is like, oh, I should have started I feel like I'm late to the game. Like I should have started public. But then part of me is like, you know what? But I've been collecting. I've been collecting. I've been, this is the stuff that now I'm able to start writing about, or well, I should say keep writing about, but now I feel confident to send it out in the world. So traveling and parenting and religion and, losing my dad and, all these things I can now write about and share and feel that confidence in sharing. So that experience.
Yeah. Well, because if you don't have all those experiences, what are you going to write about? That's our material. That's our paint and canvas that we have to gather. It's pieces of life. And that's something a friend of mine told me, actually, Linda D. Addison, who is a poet. When I first went full-time writer, she said the first 2 months, give yourself a break, even the first year, because it's going to be so hard to like think of yourself as a full-time, it's like too much pressure. And she said, just remember that when you're not writing, you're still writing, because that's the way we operate. So you were a poet the whole time. You just weren't putting it down on paper yet.
Yeah. Or just didn't recognize that title for myself. It's so true. And I know there's a nice Nin quote about you can't just spend all your time in the dark room, like for photography. You have to go out and take the pictures. You have to go out and walk. And it's the same thing with, with the writing. I think, like you say, that pressure that we feel like, and sometimes it is just taking a few days and just sauntering and experiencing and observing and just absorbing and just that is part of the writing and, validating that and not just say, I'm putting off my writing. No, it's part of it. Important part of it.
Yeah, the most important, really, in a way, because I know plenty of people who just kind of come, I'm going to write a poem, and they just throw down a lot of stuff, but then it lacks that depth because it's surface level poetry. I'm writing about whatever, but it lacks that deep emotion, which is what really winds up connecting to us. Like your poem. That is on the channel somewhere. I will link to it after this is done. The lovely language of luminosity, both the reading of that and the actual poem, and those are actually your photos. The whole thing together, I can't help but think of that poem and just have like a warm glow. Like I can almost, you bring Italy to that poem. I've never been to Italy, but I feel like I've been there because of that poem.
Oh, wow. That's very, wow. Thank you. Thanks for saying that's really encouraging to hear. That's really, I think I'll often people say, what kind of poetry do you write? And I say, I guess it's observational poetry, but it's very, I love imagery. I love, like you say, that multi-sensory. I love looking at the sounds and the tastes and the smells and the feel, but I also am very emotional in my poetry, and that I always feel, there's always some sort of, underlying current of some emotion it brings, whether it's like nostalgia or grief or, I don't know. And I didn't really start out doing that on purpose, but I started noticing it. I started noticing that, like, I do that, and then kind of embracing it. So yeah, it was about the joy of not just traveling, but the joy of learning a new language or just being around and being immersed where you're hearing a different language, and especially a language like Italian, which is like, it's music. So gorgeous. It's just the most, oh my gosh, it's just the most, musical. And like you say, it's like butter, just warm. And it's just, and so I was like, how do I capture that? How do I capture how this makes me feel? And that's where that poem came from. So I so appreciate that feedback.
Do you feel like you capture it? Like, and I'm going to say this as an example for me. A lot of times I'll write a poem, and then afterwards I'm like, I like the poem, but I feel like there's more. Like I have to keep dragging at this idea. Do you get that kind of a feeling?
Oh yeah. And I think part of that is making peace. And maybe it's from studying like St. Augustine and Aquinas my whole life, that, a lot of what they say is they spent their whole lives writing and writing and writing. And then at the end they were like, it's like straw. I think think it was Augustine that said, or maybe it was Aquinas, I get those two. But they, in the sense of ultimately it's ineffable. Ultimately we try we try, and that's like the beauty, right? We try to express, and it's like, that's what religion is. We're trying to, it's our language for attempting to understand God,
Yeah.
But as a friend of mine always said, it's kind of like nailing Jello to a tree. You're never really going to be able to fully do it, right? Anything you're doing is just kind of pointing at the tree, pointing at the moon. And so I don't think that's a reason not to do it. I think there's beauty in the attempt. There's beauty in this process and in this reach. But I think as a writer, I think it really is helpful for you, like for you as us, you meaning you out there in general.
All of us, and all encompassing you.
All of us as writers, to not put so much pressure on that we have to solve something in our poem, or that we have to come up with some sort of solution or some sort of be all, here's the thing. I think it's important to kind of live the questions, as Khalil Gibran said. And that part of that is, I think that's part of the beauty of poetry, is you can have it be unanswered, or a question mark, or it's just a phrase within the sentence is what this poem is. Or, I think that's one of the reasons I enjoy writing poetry. And compared to like my academic writing, which that is very much about, here's my theory, here's my data, here's my which is very fulfilling as well. But poetry, it's like, ooh, you can just get into all those spaces in between and all the unknowns, and you can, there's such a freedom. And so I think part of that freedom is letting ourselves off the hook of, it's okay if you didn't capture exactly what, because it's not going to be the same as what was in your head, and that's already changed anyway, and it's already going to be different for what somebody's perceiving anyway. So I think it's just about, just get something down, something that makes you happy about, or gives you some sort of life and some sort of aliveness about this thought or image or feeling or experience. And then I think that's success.
Yeah, I agree. Which kind of brings me back to a thought I've had this whole time. You said you have your journal when you're 5. I think it would be so cool. Like, I would love to read this book. If you, as an adult, addressed that 5-year-old and you published that 5-year-old's works along with you as an adult, what do you think of what that child was saying? Like, how does the 5-year-old you communicate with the you now?
Oh, wow. God, that makes me a little like emotional. That's a really good question. Gosh, I think it'd be a really an emotional and a real, I was an only child. So I think part of that was just, and I didn't, that's all I knew. So I think part of it was just a lot of being by yourself and being around grownups a lot. And so writing was one of those tools of just, creating these worlds and kind of understanding how I felt. And so I think if I was, kind of writing to or alongside that 5-year-old, I would be very encouraging and say, this isn't just something you're doing. Like, I think at the time, until my 20s, I thought, this is just something I do. It's nothing, it was very kind of, I wasn't proud. I wasn't like, ooh, I was very like, it's just something I do, but I'm not a writer or anything. I'm not a poet, and I wish I could kind of go back to that 5-year-old and say, this is good. You should do more of this. And this is something you should be proud of. I think I would say that more. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Kind of instill that confidence a little earlier.
That's going to lead me a little bit in. That's a wonderful segue into, you write children's books. You actually write a lot more than it's textbooks, poetry, children's books. So you're kind of like hitting up. How does that work? Like, is it like per project or?
A lot of naps. No, it's really been very organic. It's not any of this. I mean, truly, it hasn't been like, okay, I'm going to set out and do this. It's sort of like just this serendipitous, a lot of hard work, but also just kind of meeting with certain opportunities. I mean, the publishing the academic textbook, that was something that kind of crossed my path, and I grabbed on, and 3 years later, had a chapter. And the children's book, is in all ages. I'd call all ages, but yes, we wrote it for kids, and it was really a family sort of endeavor. I mean, I ended up writing the majority, but my girls read and gave notes, and my husband, who does all the organic farmers markets, I mean, he really was big on promoting the stories, talking about the stories at the markets. So during the pandemic, we all just had the idea of we have so many of our rescues. I mean, the majority of our rescues came from really terrible, awful, from neglect to abuse to, just some awful stories of where they came from. As an example, Charlie, one of my beloved pigs, he was found in a ditch in January in Ohio, in a little dog crate. Someone had dumped him. We're assuming he was like a Christmas pig, and somebody realized, they couldn't take care of him, and he was just in a ditch, like in the cold weather. So luckily, locked in. So there was, so luckily, one of the animal rescues shelters close by found him or got a call, and then that's how we ended up adopting him, through that shelter. And so lots of stories like that, either of just neglect or abuse or just, and that was the big thing for us, is sort of part of this was like education, because people love pigs. I love pigs. I get it. Pigs are super cute when they're little, but they're pigs. And part of, and I think there's been this real kind of like, I want a pig. And I'm like, make sure you do, because the thing is, ultimately, it's only going to really be detrimental to that animal if you're not able to take care of them and give them what they properly need. And so part of it was writing it to kind of share the stories about the pigs and our goats and our chickens and our dogs and cats, to kind of share in a not like that, but in a way to say, hey, really think about adopting, rescue, and also think about, when you are getting an animal, think about everything this animal needs, because a pig is not a dog. And there's just lots of things to think about with that. So we decided to kind of put together the stories, and then it was one night I had the kind of light bulb. I thought, what if they tell the stories? Like, what if each of the animals tells their story from their perspective? And so that was like, ding. And that's when I was like, and I just started writing. And so I wrote in between Zoom meetings and in between, I did a lot of it, in between all that. And so it's a whole book about, the goat story. Dolly and Loretta, they tell their story. They tell a tag team, because they're like, and our chicken Frances tells her story, and it's just super cute. But it was fun. It was joyful. And I think especially it came out in 2020, early 2021. And I think that was just a time where we all were just, feeling very, just kind of bleak. And so I just wanted to kind of do something that could kind of put a little bit of light into the world. And so, and we self-published that, because that was that was before the, chat. I didn't really know a lot about, I didn't want to wait 5 years, I wanted to kind of get this out. And was really happy, really pleased with, I did a lot of research and was happy with, how it came out, and we went through 2, printings, we're on the second printing almost.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So, it did well. I'd love to at some point write another one on maybe some of the animals specifically. One of them, Vinny Valentine, he's our blind 3-legged dog who has his own tremendous story. And he is now a therapy dog and through doctors, and he is just a miracle. Like we always say, he's just a little angel in a fursuit. He's just such a unique dog. So I'd love to write one about him and maybe get it out to maybe some small presses or children's authors and kind of get a little bit, get out a little bigger. So it just kind of is, it's not that I'm a children's author or it's just kind of writing.
You're just sauntering that way, right?
I'm just sauntering.
Well, I'm going to share this is your blog, or your website. Is that where we could find these books that you're talking about?
Yes. So this has got a list. We just created this, really excited about it. Nice and simple, but it's got some of my background and then links to publications, both poetry, the ecology book and the Windy Chicken. It's called Windy Chicken Animal Rescue. So that's on there too.
Oh, that's awesome. So explain the Windy Chicken Poet. It kind of makes sense, but I want to hear from your perspective. How did Windy Chicken Poet come up?
Yeah, so that was my partner's idea. He said when I was thinking about when we were putting the webpage together, and he's like, "Well, what do you want your header to be?" And I was like, "I don't know." And we live on our farm, and our farm is called the Windy Chicken Farm. And because we have open acres, we have about 8 acres, and it's very open and wide and beautiful, but it gets very windy, and so there's just always a nice breeze coming through, always windy. And the first spring we got our first batch of little baby chicks to start chickens, and now we just we grow our own. But that first spring we got a little batch, and the same day that batch came in, and a rescue duck, a friend of ours brought a rescue duck over, all the same day, a tornado came through our backyard, like the field behind our backyard. So it was just a very, like, all these things. And it was actually my mother-in-law who said, "Boy, that's a windy chicken," or something like that. It was something like, we thought, man, because we were thinking about names for the farm, and we both were like, that's a great name for the farm. And so it just stuck. And so everything's been kind of, the Windy Chicken Farm, the Windy Chicken Rescue. And then I was like, well, I mean, the Windy Chicken Poet.
Oh, I love that.
So it's all, tied together. And I hope to someday, I mean, I've got that in my idea book. I want to write a little collection, either a chapbook or maybe a full length, but on the farm, like poems of the farm. And because there's so much, I mean, there's so much fun and, quaint and quirky little things, but there's also a lot of, life and death and the process and the cycles of life and things I don't know. There's so many layers to it. And I think I'd like to really explore that in language.
Yeah. I hope you do. And as somebody we've had like a ton of rescue dogs, and we had 50 rescue chickens at one time, because you know how you order them in the mail.
Oh,
if somebody didn't pick them up, the post office would call us because they knew we had all the equipment to bring them. So we wound up with 50 meat birds at one time. That was scary, because you know how they're like, well, we don't want these.
That's a lot of chickens. Yeah.
Yeah. And it wasn't rural. It was in a city. Like, so 50 meat birds is not a good thing to have for very long.
Hopefully
3 days max.
Understanding neighbors.
Yeah, they were. But that's the thing is, everybody, I think that the concept of a farm or, animals is a very simplistic, but you're right. There's a lot of like tragedy and life lessons and lessons for us. Like, I don't know about you, but I can have the worst day. I'm to this, I'm to that, I'm not enough of this, that dissatisfaction. And I go watch chickens and I have enough. It's like they communicate contentment. So, I mean, I think that would just be the most awesome poetry book ever. And I hope you do that.
Thank you. Everything you just said, that's exactly how I feel when I go out. And on days I'll just kind of linger, after I feed and water them, I'll just kind of linger on the days that I don't have a meeting or something, and or don't have to be on campus. And it's like some of my favorite time is just sitting there. I put a little old chair out there, little lawn chair, and I just sit there and I just watch them just cluck and just observe, right? Just observe their little goat and chicken lives and piglet, and just like see how they interact and they talk to each other, just their communication, seeing all the little behavior. It's so enjoyable and relaxing and educational. It's very informative as life on this earth. It's not just us, and just tapping into that all these other layers of worlds, behavior. I love it. So thank you. I appreciate that. That's great encouragement. So
I want to encourage you because I love everything about you. so you are speaking of love. You are working on a second Sauntering book, aren't you? I've heard a rumor that will be posted on the blog later when I update it.
So that rumor is accurate. I've actually started the whole the poetry collection as an idea of 3, and it was going to be traveling with like layers of culture, religion, history, and of course, just all the stuff, all the stuff in the world. And so it just kind of came to me to start with the United States and a lot of the backpacking, and then to do one based on European travel, and then to do one based on my time in India. So that was sort of how it came to me in my mind. In my first notes, I always kind of jot down some kind of, outline, and it just came like boom, boom, boom. And so now I'm working on the Europe one, and it's really exciting, and also just kind of, it's neat to see the deepening, and I find myself doing a lot more forms, because like the American Saunter, I did a lot of free verse. I did a few forms, but mostly free verse. And then I'm finding myself in the Europe book doing more triolettes and villanelle. It's kind of like, I don't know, maybe something about like the old cathedrals and the castles and the history. It makes me want to be a little bit more like to pay homage and be a little bit more formal. There's still plenty of free verse in it too, but it's been fun to explore as a free verse person, as someone that's like, don't fence me in, I want to just write what I want to write. It's been really fun, and it's really stretched me to kind of put those restrictions, because in a way, ironically, right, it's really freeing, because it's by doing that, you kind of see it. Just, I don't know, it opens up a different part of your brain on how to work with language. So I've been really excited to explore that, and as sort of like a fun challenge, like Sudoku. It's like, that's how I feel about the forms, like Sudoku. Sometimes I love them, and sometimes I'm like, oh. But it's overall been really wonderful.
Yeah, well, it is true that you say that too. That's so interesting that like free, you think of Americans as, we're not a very structured people, typically driven, but not structured. We don't know where we're going. We're just going to be driven there. And then, using the forms and stuff in the European book. So I'm kind of curious what will happen in the India, in the third book now.
I'm very curious too. I haven't started. I've got a few ideas, and I've got a couple of things, but I haven't started. I'm still so like immersed. I tend to be very, maybe it's like that Buddhist. I tend to be very in the project I'm in, and I might have a couple of little things, but so I haven't gotten to India yet. But I'm also very curious. I can feel it. I can feel it starting to percolate, and I'm thinking the same thing. I'm kind of waiting for it to surprise me and think, well, what's that going to look like? Is it going to be, I don't know. India is very
rich and textured and color, like vivid.
Yeah. So I think it's going to be only fitting and do it justice to have the forms, the containers be like that too. I don't think I'm going to have a lot of sestinas and sonnets. I don't think I'm going to have a lot of that with India. I think it's going to be I think it's going to be pretty open. Maybe a ghazal, just to pay homage there. But overall, I think it's going to be. I'm gonna let the experience lead me and how that comes out. So I'm really excited and curious to see what comes out.
I'm gonna say I was gonna say I approve, but that's not my job. But I fully support. We'll say fully support your methodology here of just basically letting yourself be open and letting the poetry and you evolve together is awesome. And that would probably be why it is so incredibly beautiful and so expressive. I mean, that's with the Italian one. That's where I became your fan. Just going to say, with that poem, I think that's the only poem I know of you at this moment. So we do need to get American Saunter out there so that we can start reading this. But yeah, you're doing it right. I'll just say that. I'm really, and I think that's going to wind up being the feedback that you get is you're doing this right. This is incredible.
That's thank you. That's amazing feedback, because again, starting kind of later in life. I was 45, 46 to 45 is when I was like, okay, I just achieved, I had tenure and becoming a full professor, and my dad passed away, and my girls are getting older now. And there's sort of all the three of these things kind of happened at once, where I realized, okay, well, now's the time. It's like, okay, the things that my kind of all my energy and effort has been, valid, very valid, going towards, it's like, okay, now I can kind of put some of that energy and that heart and emotion into writing, and really, really focusing it. So, but of course, what comes with that is a lot of insecurity but I'm not an English professor, and I'm not a poet. I'm not this. So hearing that, of course, is extremely, I just can't put into words how valuable that is to me, because it makes you feel like, okay, because it's a lot of intuition, right? It's just so much kind of following your instincts and saying this feels right and going with that. That's really been the entire journey. Like, this feels right, I'm going with that. That doesn't feel right, I'm not going to do that. And that's been pretty much how I've operated. So so thank you for, for that positive and very encouraging kind of stay on the course. That's good.
Oh, absolutely. I'm like, don't divert, because I need to read this. And I feel like we need to read this, like, culturally, especially in America, but globally, that whole idea of relaxing and letting ourselves develop to a place rather than just going, making that the goal.
Yeah.
Well, we are just about out of time. We actually went over time, so I've been really enjoying talking to you. I want to close, though, with you telling us all the things that you have coming up. Where can we go to support you? Obviously, Windy Chicken Poet, which is a fabulous name. Nobody's going to forget that. Where can we get a hold of you?
Well, so yeah, the website, and I've got a Facebook under Amanda Hayden Facebook as well, where I put any announcements. There's a lot of exciting. April's National Poetry Month, so so exciting, because serendipitously there's a lot of I've worked really hard all winter sending a lot of things out, and they're starting. It seems like it's all kind of that feast or famine, right? It's like, whew, it's all starting to come. A lot of the acceptances and a lot of the things are going to be published in April. So there's going to be quite a few poems that I'm really excited to share, that will be published by different literary reviews and journals, and they're all listed on the website. And I'll be, as they come out, I'll be linking them to the Facebook site as well. And so some really exciting things there. And I'm doing a Poem in Your Pocket event at the campus I teach at, and a few events there. And then hopefully, like I said, the American Saunter is in the ether. It's being considered. And I've also got a chapbook I just finished and sent out, that's also being passed around. So hopefully in a few months, there'll be some sort of news regarding either one of those, of the manuscript and the chapbook. So things, the momentum is, I can feel the momentum. It's just sort of being patient, and just like, as soon as I sent off the American Saunter, I was like, well, now I'm going to work on Europe. I'm not going to, just kind of keep that momentum going.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is definitely the way to do it, I think. So, well, thank you for being on the show. And when you start coming out with those books, let me know, because we need to do this again. And then we can have copies of the book to show off.
Yes.
But yeah, I wish you luck with everything. I'm very excited to see where you go with all of this. I am a fan of the Windy Chicken Poet. Never thought I would say those words, but here they are.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Absolutely. We are going to close on a poem as usual, but due to a lack of preparation from somebody in the studio, not named Amanda, I didn't have a video already recorded. So I'm going to share one from the Ladies of Horror project, which I think a lot of people that are familiar with the show are also familiar with. Nina Darkangela gets together and she sends out a photo prompt to a group of ladies. I think that's the only requirement, is that you must be a lady. And we all write poetry or flash based on that. So basically an ekphrastic. And this is mine because I can't find any other videos of anybody else. But I am super excited because we started recording them last month or maybe the month before on a whim. And I just made a trailer intro for it. And I do love doing that. Who knew that would wind up being my hobby one day, is to do video things. But so that's what we're going to close on. And then if you want to find more of those, look up Ladies of Horror on Facebook and you'll find all the things. Anita Stewart, who is in the audience, is one of those Ladies of Horror. AF Stewart, you'll find her under. So we're going to close with that. I thank you so much, Amanda, for being here. Catch us Wednesday, which I will have Amy Zollers, my poetry sidekick, very often, and another musician, Sean, whose name I cannot remember at the top of my head, But anyways, we're going to have that show. And we're going to have 30 for 30 poets in 30 days coming up, which I believe in the rush you said you were doing, right? Not to put you on the spot, but
Yep, I got one picked out. Really excited.
all right,
about it.
awesome. Because I was like, I did hear that from you, right? I know I was rushing when I jumped on. Okay, awesome. So watch out for that, everybody. And otherwise, I will see you Wednesday and then Saturday.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Hi guys, Nina here, welcoming you to yet another reading from the Ladies of Horror Picture Prompt Challenge, presented by Angela Eureka Smith. Enjoy the reading.
Hi, I am going to read to you my poem for the Ladies of Horror Picture Prompt Challenge. Every month, Nina Darkangela sends a bunch of us a photo, and we write a poem or a flash fiction based on it. And this month, we chose, or she chose, different photos of women from history. So if you want to go see that photo, you can go to the link below that says read along, and you can also read along this poem with me. And this is called The Unfelt Flames of Kate Leon. And this was inspired by the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, which was one of the greatest industrial disasters of all time in the United States. And Kate Leon is one of the youngest victims of the fire. The other victim was Rosaria Sarah Maltese, and they were both 14. The Unfelt Flames of Kate Leon. The beginning and the end are the same moment for me today, when the flames around us engulf the unfelt flames in my heart, and my future, my dreams and tomorrows, and God, us and them, and everything I know, in a moment turns to ash. And I am on fire, a flame for life, for the butcher boy, and for my expected $7 earned from my 52 loyal hours, spent cutting shirtwaists no longer in fashion, for ladies I will never know, and as the lady I will never be, in a moment turns to ash. Saturday night and freedom. It approaches with the fire that blisters the blisters that I fussed over this morning on my tired end of the week fingers. Ignorant, I blindly wasted this day. I let it spin by, unseen, my eyes glued on the end where I follow the crowd, not to death, but to pay, which in a moment turns to ash. I have pined for the moment when I can be on fire, eager for the promised kiss that now wastes poised on my lips, parted not from a sigh, but a cry, as the unfelt flames of my youth are consumed by the conflagration that surrounds us all. Dawn rose with its usual promise of life, never hinting at an end at the end of a day that in a moment turns to ash. And thank you.